Today I want to speak to you on the topic, peace, is it just a dream? I want to say that again, peace, is it just a dream? Well, it was summertime 1984 and the living was easy for Marion. I was a Christian college student excited about what life had in store. I was on my way to experiencing the American dream. And that particular weekend, my brothers and I, we were on our way from Montreal back home to Boston. My brother was dating his then fiancée, Brenda at the time. Lincoln was dating Brenda. And so we would go up to Montreal ever so often. And so we were on our way back, a routine trip. And suddenly we noticed that behind us, the flashing lights of a cop car. And so we wondered, you know, Lincoln thinks, wow, I guess I'm kind of speeding, so I need, what's going on here? And so we got even more perplexed when we suddenly heard one of the cops say with a loudspeaker, okay, pull over, quickly. Well, Lincoln says, Lincoln is sort of big brotherly kind of guy, and he says, don't worry about it, guys, just, I'm going to take care of it. So Sean and I was about 21 at the time, and Sean and I kind of settled back saying, okay, Lincoln, you handle it, and we're just going to settle back. But we were never prepared. We were never prepared for what was going to happen as our American dream suddenly descended into a nightmare in those few moments. Well, I had a sheltered life. I'll give you a little background on me. I had a pretty sheltered life. We'd come from the Caribbean, and we were used to sort of the easygoing life. I come from a nation of many cultures and people, and it was just, I saw life through very different lenses. But we were going to experience our first taste, real taste of racism in America. Like I said, up until that point, my brothers, they had kind of been followed around by cops in stores, and we kind of looked on TV and see black men being chased by police or killed at the hands of police, and it was a story on TV. We were saddened by it, but it didn't affect our lives. Not until that day. Well, the tire screeched, the man jumped out of the car, and these were two armed white officers. And they said, hands on the dashboard. We were thinking, okay, what crime did we commit? We're concerned. The guns were drawn, and they were aimed at our temples. One of the cops pulled Lincoln out of the car and began to frisk him violently. And Lincoln said to God, he said, Lord, please don't let them kill me because I'm black, because he had heard those stories on TV and on the radio. Well, when the trooper could no longer get what he wanted from Lincoln, he dragged him to the cruiser behind as the other one guarded Sean and me. And I'm telling you, I could never forget that day and that moment as he aimed this gun and he was guarding us, and I saw the fear in his blue eyes staring at us, and beads of sweat were coming down his face. And we stayed there, and we felt if we had even made a move out of fear, something terrible could have happened. Well, my friend, my brother, Lincoln, would later come back with the cop, and very happily they would re-enter back into the scene, and the cop then apologized. They apologized. They said, there was something going on where there was a report that an armed person, an escaped convict somewhere from Virginia or somewhere in the South, was on his way to Vermont. And so that they thought it was us, and that person was us, and they apologized, and they said, you're such a good, decent family, we're sorry about this, and they profusely apologized. Well, we were just glad for our lives, and we were glad we didn't get a ticket, and we're on our way home. But suddenly it dawned on us how close we were to death. And for about an hour, we were so silent. No one said a word. And I don't know if any of you have ever had muscle spasms, but that's the first time I've had it. We were all going like this. We were shaking. We could not believe how close we were to death. A scenario that we had only read about on the newspaper or seen on TV was now our reality. My life was suddenly disrupted with the fact that I was a black woman in America. I was a double minority. Up until that point, minority meant for me, well, the number of people. But now it meant the intrinsic worth of those people. I had been disempowered, reduced to a mere criminal because of the color of my skin. My peace, my friends, was violently ripped away from me. In fact, I wondered to that point, did I really have it? Did I really have peace? This was a defining moment for me. That day made me question this notion of racial reconciliation. I discovered that I was always talking about it. And like I said, I come from a multicultural nation, so that was always a part of what I talked about and what I felt called to. But now it felt, that's just idealism. That's not real. That's a pipe dream. Now that injustice had personally impacted my life, the question became, would you still answer that call to be a peacemaker, to be a reconciler? And what will that call cost you? What price would you have to pay for the call of God upon your life to be a peacemaker? Sure, I would still talk about the fact that I was called to be a repairer of the breach. That looked really good on my mission statement. But all the while I wondered, could this really be my lived reality? In the face of a broken world, in the face of systems of fear and injustice that separate people behind walls, that separate people from each other, even within the church. Is racial reconciliation even possible? And can God use me to be an agent of it? Well, in the days and the years that followed, I would say yes to that call. But it would continue to come at a very high price. You know, Jesus said in Matthew 5:9, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God." As a child of God, being called to be a peacemaker means a true encounter with the Prince of Peace himself. But that encounter is not that one-time thing in just salvation. We have to continually draw the peace of God. We have the peace of God, but we have to continually live in that peace. And we have to understand the suffering of Christ and know the forgiveness of Christ so that we can extend that to others. I had to realize that peace and reconciliation was not my dream. It was not my call. It was not my good thing to do for God. But it was God's dream to be fulfilled through me. And so I want to ask you the question. It's a hypothetical question. But is peace just a dream for you? You know, Dr. Martin Luther King's dream was a dream of peace. He said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." His dream was a dream of peace. And although it was rooted in the American dream, it was much greater than that, thank God. It was a dream of true shalom, a sense of wholeness and well-being that starts within ourselves and outflows into society, that affects our relationships with others. He called it soul force. And that is Yeshua's dream. That was a dream that he had for that hemorrhaging woman as she encountered him. He, the lifter of the oppressed, as she, that social outcast, touched him, the one with healing in his wings, she left that place transformed. She left that place a reconciler. You know, that is the same dream that God has for you and for me today. It is the same dream. He has called us to become peacemakers. He has called us to become ambassadors of reconciliation. Now, I don't mean that necessarily in a political sense. So we're not necessarily, all of us wouldn't go and picket and that kind of thing. No, I'm talking about politics. I'm talking about the way that we live our lives, the relationships that we have, the relationships that we engage in. We are to be people of reconciliation. We are to cross the boundaries. We are to be people who understand the forgiveness and the grace of God and always willing to reach out to others. Are you a reconciler? Are you a man or woman of peace? You know, one of the greatest gifts that Jesus has given us, the Prince of Peace has given us, is his peace. It is his shalom. As I said, it's that thing that is that well-being in our soul. You know, wholeness and well-being comes some people try to make the community whole, right? They work to make the community whole. And nothing's necessarily wrong with that entirely, but if you're not whole inside, your community won't be whole. Wholeness comes out of our being, and then the community is affected. So if you have people that are broken, you're going to have a broken community. If you have people that are against each other or don't like each other, the community will continue to be fragmented. Sometimes it takes a while for that peace to be lived out in our lives, for the true empowerment that comes through the shalom of God to be activated in our lives. We are living in an old identity, and God wants us to live in a new identity as those who have received his peace. When we have received God's peace, we become ambassadors of reconciliation. That's what Paul talks about when he says God has reconciled us to himself through Jesus and has committed us. He has committed to us as ambassadors the message of reconciliation. When you reconcile with someone, it means that you affirm that person's value as made in the image of God. Whether that person believes what you believe or necessarily looks the way or comes from the same culture, you treat that person as one made in the image of God. You see, my value was taken away that day through racism and stereotyping, and I was treated less than made in the image of God. But I'm glad to say that it was restored, and it continues to be restored as I encounter the Prince of Peace in my life, as he reshapes and redefines my identity.